Of it to be even more serious than yesterday.
I think you could definitely make the argument that it is, because what this program enables the National Security Agency to do is to reach directly into the servers of the largest internet companies in the world, things that virtually every human being in the Western world now uses to communicate with one another, and take whatever it is that they want without any checks of any kind. There's no courts looking over their shoulder to see what they're taking, and they don't even have the check that they have to go to the internet companies and ask for it any longer. They've been given or have taken, depending on who you talk to, direct access into the pipes where all of these conversations take place, and can suck up whatever it is that they want at any given moment.
I mean, what this means, in a nutshell, is that the NSA, on behalf of the Obama administration, have been secretly looking at just about any kind of communication they see fit from any American.
Yeah, I think this is really the important point, Piers, is that there is a massive apparatus within the United States government that, with complete secrecy, has been building this enormous structure that has only one goal, and that is to destroy privacy and anonymity, not just in the United States, but in the world. That is not hyperbole. That is their objective, to make it so that every single form of human communication, human interaction, human behavior can never be beyond their reach. And they have developed extraordinarily sophisticated technologies and enormously expensive mechanisms in order to make that happen. And it's well past time that we have a debate about whether that's the kind of country and world in which we want to live, but we haven't had that debate because it's all done in secrecy. And the Obama administration has been very aggressive about bullying and threatening anybody who thinks about exposing it or writing about it or even doing journalism about it. And it's well past time that that come to an end.
Absolutely. Now, this new bombshell tonight involves a setup called PRISM. It sounds like something out of Star Wars, but PRISM is now responsible, I read, either in your report or the Washington Post, and we've got Barton Gellman coming up who wrote that PRISM is responsible for 1 in 7 of all the intelligence reports by the NSA, and is likely to be an even bigger percentage going forward. I mean, that's a quite staggering thing to discover when no one even knows what PRISM is.
Precisely. I mean, no one's ever heard of it before, and yet it has extraordinary consequences for what our government does, for how the world is impacted. If you look at the pages of reports that the PRISM program talks about and that the NSA boasts about, they pride themselves on discovering all sorts of political conversations in places like Turkey and Israel. They use Facebook and Google and Skype to invade conversations about a whole variety of things in South America, in Asia, and many times people who are involved in these conversations and where they originate are people in the United States. It's all done without warrants and without accountability, and the entire world is impacted.
Now, I've got to ask you this, because we've seen what's happened to AP journalists and to Mr. Rosen at Fox News. Are you worried now that they're going to come after you, Big Brother style, try and come after your sources?
Well, I mean, I think the sources behind this are incredibly courageous people who could have sold this information for extraordinary amounts of money to foreign governments or handed it over had that been their objective, to harm the United States, to enemies of the United States. They didn't. They came forward with immense amounts of courage because they believe that their fellow citizens should be aware of what their government is doing. And so when I look at their courage, I get inspired by that. And I know that the Constitution, right in the First Amendment, says that as a citizen and as a journalist, I'm guaranteed the right to engage in freedom of the press and to report on what my government is doing in the dark. That's not just my right, but my obligation. And so whatever the Justice Department wants to do, they can beat their chest all they want. People like Dianne Feinstein and Saxby Chambliss can have press conferences threatening people for bringing light to what it is that they're doing. But the only people who are going to be investigated are them. And it's well past time that these threats start to be treated with the contempt that they deserve. And that's certainly how I intend to treat them moving forward, with more investigation and disclosures.
The response from the people who think this is not a bad idea can be summed up by Congressman Mike Rogers. Listen to what he had to say today.
I can tell you why this program is important, that within the last few years, this program was used to stop a terrorist attack in the United States. We know that.
I mean, we don't know what that is, and it's the kind of thing you'd expect him to trot out, I guess. But I mean, what is your reaction to that?
Well, it's fascinating that the most right-wing members of the Congress, like Mike Rogers and Lindsey Graham, have become the administration's most vocal defenders, the Obama administration's most vocal defenders, because it's a right-wing mentality that says that we should just trust the government to know everything about us in the name of security. But I think the tactic that you're seeing there, which is increasingly being exposed as frivolous and manipulative, is that every time the U.S. government gets caught doing anything that they shouldn't be doing or that people are stunned to learn that they're doing, the playbook that they use over and over and that they've used over and over for the last decade is to just simply scream terrorist or terrorism over and over in the hope that they will put Americans into enough fear that they'll simply acquiesce to whatever the government is doing. And I think it's critically important that Americans understand that this quote-unquote threat is one that is less likely to kill them than things like a lightning strike or a bathtub accident, and that it's time to stop allowing the U.S. government to get more and more power for itself and destroy more and more of our rights simply by invoking this terrorist canard over and over and over again. We see with the phone records, they weren't targeting terrorists. They were targeting all Americans indiscriminately. And that's the same with this PRISM program as well. And that's why the light is so vital, because it exposes how false their justifications continuously are.
Just finally, Glenn, just to try and clarify what their purpose was here. Was their primary purpose to root out Americans who may be up to no good, or foreigners who are up to no good?
Well, under the surveillance law that passed in 2008, that a bipartisan Congress passed, they eliminated the warrant requirement for all conversations except ones that take place by and among Americans exclusively on American soil. So they don't need warrants now for people who are foreigners outside of the U.S., but they also don't need warrants for Americans who are in the United States communicating with people reasonably believed to be outside of the U.S. So these programs almost certainly, such as the PRISM one, almost certainly are sweeping up conversations of American citizens on U.S. soil, as long as the NSA decides that the person they're talking to probably is outside the U.S. But again, the fact that there are no checks, no oversight about who's looking over the NSA's shoulder, means that they can take whatever they want. And the fact that it's all behind a wall of secrecy and they threaten people who want to expose it means that whatever they're doing, even violating the law, is something that we're unlikely to know until we start having real investigations and real transparency into what it is that the government is doing. That's what we need first and foremost.
Glenn Greenwald, congratulations again on exposing what is a true scandal. I appreciate you joining me.
Thank you.
The Washington Post's Barton Gellman joins me now from the nation's capital with late-breaking reaction to a scandal that's exploded over the last 24 hours. Barton, you've got this extraordinary report as well tonight involving this new thing, PRISM, which just seems to be a license for the government through the NSA to get into almost any internet server and find and retrieve anything they like.
Well, they certainly have that technical capability.